you really think I'd waste my life on a crippled man? The second he signs that inheritance, Victor, I'm gone with you. $500 million will be mine tomorrow. Then I'll leave him rotting in that chair. I married him for his money, not his broken body. Tomorrow, the $500 million is ours. By this time tomorrow, I'll be free. He'll sign the papers, and I'll never look at that cripple again. He's pathetic, Victor. 500 million and a broken man to boot. Tomorrow it's ours, then I'm gone. Those were the last words Cassandra Whitmore thought her crippled husband would never hear, whispered with venom to her lover, believing herself untouchable. She had no idea that Daniel Whitmore, the man she dismissed as powerless, had already prepared the most brilliant and brutal act of revenge she could imagine. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, greed, betrayal, and payback. Viewers, have you ever let someone too close, only to realize they saw you as nothing but a stepping stone? Has anyone ever smiled to your face while plotting your downfall? Have you ever been underestimated so completely that it turned into your greatest weapon? Tell me, if you were Daniel, would you forgive, or would you retaliate and fight back? Moments before handing over his $500 million inheritance to the wife he thought adored him, crippled heir Daniel Whitmore stopped cold in the hallway of his mansion. Through the crack of his study door, he heard the words that shattered his world. I married a cripple, Victor. Do you think I ever loved him? Please. Once he signs tomorrow, the money is ours. Then I'll leave him rotting in that chair while we start a new life. Those were the last words he expected from the woman who kissed his forehead every night and pretended to cry with him in the dark. He gripped the wheels of his chair, his heart breaking, until something inside him shifted. She thought he was powerless, but what Daniel did next would leave her begging, and the world talking. Moments before handing his $500 million inheritance to the woman he believed loved him, Daniel Whitmore wheeled himself quietly down the marble hallway of his mansion. His hand trembled on the rim of the chair, not from weakness but from the weight of the decision ahead. His father's voice echoed in memory, "Trust wisely, Daniel. Money reveals who they are." The study door stood ajar, golden lamplight spilling into the dark hall. He pushed forward, careful not to let the wheels creak. Then the words cut through the silence, each one like a knife sliding between his ribs. Once he signs tomorrow, Victor, it's ours. 500 million. Do you really think I'd stay with a cripple for love? Cassie's voice. His wife. The woman who had smiled at him in front of cameras, kissed his forehead before bed, whispered promises of forever when the pain in his legs kept him awake at night. Daniel froze, heart hammering. Victor Lane's smooth reply followed. We have to be cautious. If he hesitates. Cassie's laugh interrupted, sharp and merciless. He always folds when I touch his hand, when I call him darling. He's pathetic. He'll sign. And the moment he does, I'm gone. You and me, Victor. A new life. No more wheelchair, no more pity. The sound of their lips meeting reached Daniel like a death knell. His eyes burned, but the tears refused to fall. Instead, a cold fire lit inside him. He slowly wheeled back into the shadows, the mansion's walls closing in like conspirators. He remembered another night, 6 years ago, the night the steel beam crushed his legs. The newspapers had called him a hero for saving a young worker. Cassie had called him brave. For years he believed her tenderness was love, when in truth, it was calculation. His gaze shifted to the oil portrait of Edward Whitmore that loomed above the grand staircase. The old man's stern eyes seemed alive, watching. For a moment Daniel imagined his father's voice again. Do not hand your soul to someone who can't carry it. He rolled into the drawing room where the fire crackled. On the mantel, Cassie's framed smile stared back, flawless, rehearsed. Beneath it, legal papers waited. The inheritance transfer. $500 million. Everything his father built. A memory flickered, their wedding day. Cassie's hand clutching his during the vows, her lips whispering, "I'll never leave you." But Daniel remembered now the way her eyes darted to Victor in the crowd, a detail he had buried at the time. The betrayal tonight wasn't sudden. It had been foreshadowed in every late-night girls' trip, every roll of her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, every sigh when she pushed his wheelchair. Daniel's knuckles tightened on the chair. He whispered to the fire, his voice steady, cold. "You think I'm powerless, Cassie? You'll see what a Whitmore does when betrayed." His hand reached toward the envelope of papers, not to sign, but to set the trap. The fire crackled in the drawing room, but Daniel's mind was far from warmth. His wife's words still rang in his ears like the strike of a hammer, "I married a cripple, tomorrow I'll be free." He pressed his palms against the wheels of his chair and let the flames pull him back into the night that changed everything. Steel groaned. Men screamed. Rain lashed against the scaffolding of the bridge he had designed. Daniel remembered shoving the terrified young worker aside, the boy's eyes wide with fear. Then the weight of the beam crushed down across his legs. A crack like thunder, a pain so deep it turned the world black. He woke in the hospital days later, his father standing stiffly at the foot of the bed. The old man's voice was steady but grim. "You saved a life, son. But you'll never walk again. Be careful who you let close to you now. Men will respect you for your courage. Women, some will pity you. Others will see opportunity." That warning, one he had brushed aside back then, now sliced through him like prophecy. He remembered the headlines, "Whitmore heir sacrifices legs to save worker." The cameras. The applause. And then the silence, the long nights where he stared at his useless body and wondered if love was something he would ever deserve again. That was when she appeared. Cassie. It was a charity gala, his first public event since the accident. He sat in his wheelchair, feeling invisible, watching as people smiled politely then drifted past him like he wasn't there. And then she walked in. A red dress clinging to her frame, hair shining like glass. She didn't flinch at his chair. She knelt down, touched his hand, and whispered, "You're braver than all of them combined." That line had shattered something inside him. He believed her. For the first time since the accident, he felt seen as a man, not a broken body. He never noticed how her eyes lingered a second too long on Victor Lane, his financial advisor, across the ballroom. He never questioned why she was so eager to help him with therapy, why her compassion always seemed to come with calculation. Now, years later, those memories twisted into cruel clarity. Her soft kisses at night, her rehearsed tears when he woke screaming from phantom pain, all of it was strategy. Her loyalty had been an investment, and tomorrow was her payday. He gritted his teeth and whispered to the fire, "You thought I was broken, Cassie. You thought this chair made me weak." His hand reached for the folder of inheritance papers. His father's lawyer had left them on the mantel earlier that day. Everyone expected him to sign in the morning, handing over control to his wife as tradition demanded. But Daniel wasn't his father's fool of a crippled son. He was a Whitmore, raised on iron discipline and ruthless foresight. As his fingers traced the edge of the folder, a faint sound broke his thoughts. A phone buzzing in the next room. Cassie's laughter carried down the hall, muffled but sharp. He stilled, listening. "Yes, Victor. He'll sign. Trust me. By tomorrow, we'll be gone." Daniel's jaw tightened. The phone clicked, silence followed. He looked once more at his father's portrait, the stern eyes watching from above the fireplace. His voice, steady and low, filled the empty room. "She thinks I'm signing over my fortune. Tomorrow, she signs her own destruction." The flames hissed, swallowing his vow, but the house itself seemed to hold its breath. The wedding had been dazzling, the kind of spectacle that papers love to photograph. White roses lined the Whitmore estate garden, a live orchestra played softly beneath a marquee of stars, and Daniel sat in his wheelchair at the end of the aisle waiting for the woman who had convinced him he was still worthy of love. Cassie glided down the path in a gown that sparkled under lantern light, her smile so radiant it made onlookers whisper, "She truly loves him." Daniel believed it with all his heart. He never noticed the brief flicker of her eyes toward Victor Lane in the second row, the ambitious financial advisor who had positioned himself close to the family after Edward Whitmore's death. When the vows came, Cassie squeezed Daniel's hand. "I'll never leave you," she whispered just for him, her eyes glistening with what he thought were tears of devotion. In truth, she was already rehearsing the act that would carry her through years of marriage. A performance polished enough to fool a crippled man who desperately needed to be loved. The reception had roared with laughter, glasses clinking. Daniel remembered raising a toast. "To my wife," he said, smiling up at her. "The strongest woman I know, for choosing me." Cassie kissed his cheek sweetly while Victor leaned in close, his voice low but deliberate, "With her by your side, Daniel, you'll never be alone again." Daniel had felt reassured. Cassie had glanced at Victor with the briefest smile that didn't reach her eyes. Years blurred into routines. Cassie wheeled him into therapy sessions, sat beside him at charity dinners, read to him at night when phantom pain made his body shiver. To the world, she was the image of loyalty. But Daniel began to notice things, subtle at first. The way she sighed when she thought he couldn't hear. The roll of her eyes when guests praised his courage. The late nights explained away with girls' trips and spa weekends. One night, long before the betrayal he overheard in the study, he had reached for her hand in bed. She let him hold it for a while, then slipped it away gently, turning to her side. In the faint light he caught her expression, not of love but of calculation, as if she were weighing something in her mind. He told himself it was his imagination. That was the night he first began setting small tests, subtle, invisible to her. A recorder tucked beneath the study desk. A trusted lawyer adjusting the clauses of the inheritance. Daniel never said a word, but the seed of doubt had been planted, watered by each insincere kiss she pressed on his forehead. One evening over dinner, Cassie had leaned close, her voice coaxing. "Darling, why delay? Once the inheritance is in both our names, we'll finally be secure. Don't you want peace of mind?" Daniel studied her across the candlelight, the way her eyes shone more for the thought of money than for him. He gave a soft smile and said only, "Peace of mind is priceless." She kissed him then, but the kiss was hollow, and Daniel knew. His father's warning echoed louder than ever. "Be careful who you let close." What Cassie didn't know was that every lie she whispered, every touch she faked, every glance she shared with Victor had already been noted. Daniel, the crippled heir she thought helpless, had begun weaving his own web. And when the moment came, she would be the one caught in it. Cassie's smile had grown sharper in the weeks leading to the inheritance transfer, her patience unraveling thread by thread. Over breakfast one morning, she placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, her diamond ring catching the sunlight. "Darling, why drag this out? You'll feel so much lighter once the papers are signed. Don't you want us to finally move on?" Her tone was honey, but Daniel heard the steel beneath it. He lifted his coffee slowly, watching the steam curl. "Peace isn't in a signature, Cassie," he said softly. Her eyes flashed, just for a moment, before she caught herself and leaned in to kiss his cheek. That look did not escape him. Neither did the way her phone buzzed with Victor's name glowing on the screen when she thought he wasn't watching. She silenced it quickly, murmuring something about a spa appointment. Daniel only nodded. Inside, the quiet ledger of her lies was filling with entries. Flashbacks haunted him during these encounters, as if his father's warnings had planted themselves in his bones. He remembered Edward Whitmore sitting with him in the hospital years ago, the man's gravelly voice cutting through morphine fog, "Money does not blind men, son, it blinds women. And the wrong woman will sell your soul if you let her." Daniel had smiled then, too numb to argue. Now, every word echoed like prophecy fulfilled. Cassie pressed harder each day. She began bringing up grand plans, vacations in Europe, new estates by the coast. Think of it, Daniel, she cooed one evening, tracing the rim of his glass. A fresh start, away from all this pain. Away from these walls that remind you of your accident. He turned toward the fire, the reflection dancing in his eyes. Funny, he said, voice low, these walls remind me of sacrifice. They also remind me of loyalty, something rarer than gold. Cassie's smile faltered before she recovered with a laugh. Victor's shadow stretched longer in their lives too. He came by under the guise of financial meetings, papers in hand, his polished shoes echoing through the estate halls. Everything's in order, Daniel, Victor assured him one afternoon, sliding documents across the desk. His gaze flicked toward Cassie with the briefest glint of complicity before he leaned back. All that's missing is your signature. Daniel studied him quietly, fingers brushing the pen but not lifting it. Signatures are powerful things, Victor. They bind. They also condemn. The advisor chuckled lightly, but unease tightened his jaw. That night, when Cassie slipped into bed, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the day of his accident, the worker's life saved by his sacrifice, and wondered what kind of man he would be remembered as, the crippled fool who signed away his inheritance, or the Whitmore who turned betrayal into retribution. In the silence of midnight, he wheeled himself into the study, the place where shadows whispered secrets. He opened the bottom drawer where the recorder lay hidden, its tiny red light steady, loyal. Cassie and Victor had already damned themselves with their own words. Daniel pressed play for a moment, letting the venom of their betrayal wash over him again, strengthening his resolve. He whispered into the empty room, tomorrow, you'll get exactly what you asked for, Cassie. Not freedom. Judgment. The flames in the hearth snapped, as if the house itself approved of the sentence. Cassie's plotting grew bolder the closer the inheritance signing approached. She was no longer whispering to Victor only in dark corners, she risked conversations even inside the estate, confident that Daniel's chair confined him not just physically but mentally. One evening she poured herself a glass of wine, her silk robe flowing as she leaned against the balcony. You worry too much, she murmured into her phone. By tomorrow, I'll have $500 million at my fingertips. He worships me too much to question anything. Her laughter floated into the night like broken glass. Victor's voice came muffled but eager. Cassie, don't underestimate him. His father raised him sharper than he lets on. If he suspects, she cut him off. He doesn't suspect. He clings to me like a drowning man. I'll press my lips to his cheek, whisper how I've stood by him all these years, and he'll melt like always. Then we vanish. Europe. New names. New life. I'll never smell this suffocating house again. She hung up quickly, smoothing her robe as if words alone could wrinkle her. She didn't notice the faint red light glimmering from the recorder Daniel had hidden in the study doorway, capturing every syllable. In another part of the house, Daniel sat in the dim library, his father's cane across his lap though he had no use for it. He closed his eyes and drifted back to Edward Whitmore's funeral, where Victor had lingered too close to Cassie even then. He remembered shaking the advisor's hand, feeling the man's grip linger a beat too long, his eyes glancing toward the young widow Daniel had just married. Cassie had squeezed his arm tightly, whispering, "Don't listen to gossip, love. People will always try to tarnish happiness." He had believed her. Now, in the quiet of the library, the memory felt less like gossip and more like foreshadowing. The next morning Cassie breezed into the dining room in a tailored cream dress, the kind that spoke of money even before she had it. She leaned down, kissed Daniel's forehead. "Today's the day," she whispered with a rehearsed tenderness. "A new chapter." Daniel studied her, his eyes calm, unreadable. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "A new chapter indeed." She smiled, satisfied, and turned away, missing the flicker of steel in his gaze. Inside, Daniel was already replaying the recording he would unveil at the ceremony. He imagined her face when her own words condemned her, the mask slipping in front of lawyers, witnesses, the very world she tried to impress. He had once sacrificed his legs to save a stranger. Tomorrow, he would sacrifice his marriage to save his soul. The fire that had nearly died in him years ago now burned again, this time not for survival but for justice. The clock ticked toward the hour of reckoning. The grand hall of the Whitmore estate was prepared as though for a coronation. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, sunlight poured through high windows, and the long mahogany table was cleared for one thing only, the inheritance documents that would determine the future of $500 million. Cassie swept in first, her heels tapping against marble, her cream dress hugging her form, her smile glowing for the small audience of lawyers and witnesses. She kissed Daniel lightly on the cheek, her voice thick with practiced devotion. "Darling, today we finally secure our future." Daniel sat in his wheelchair at the head of the table, his hands folded over his father's cane. His expression was unreadable, his eyes calm like still water masking a storm beneath. He nodded once, slowly. "Yes, Cassie. Today decides everything." Victor arrived moments later, carrying his briefcase and exuding confidence. He clapped Daniel gently on the shoulder. "Everything's in order. Just sign here, and peace will be yours." His gaze flickered toward Cassie. The two shared the faintest smile, too subtle for most eyes but not for Daniel's. The lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling the papers. "Mr. Whitmore, this document transfers control of the estate in accordance with your father's will. Your wife will share in the inheritance, and together you'll govern the trust." Cassie's fingers brushed Daniel's arm tenderly, her nails digging just slightly into his sleeve. "Sign it, love," she whispered, her eyes bright. "Let's put the past behind us." Daniel picked up the pen, his hand trembling as though from weakness, though in truth it was rage controlled to a fine edge. He lingered, looking down at the paper, then up at his wife. "You've stood by me through everything, Cassie," he said softly. "At least, that's what everyone believes." Her smile stiffened for a moment before she laughed, light and airy. "Of course I have. Don't be silly." The pen touched the paper, ink scratching against parchment. Cassie exhaled in relief. She turned to Victor, her eyes triumphant, already imagining the wealth at her fingertips. Then Daniel placed the pen down, leaned back, and nodded to his lawyer. "Read the amended clause." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat again. "As per Mr. Whitmore's instructions, in the event of proven infidelity or betrayal, Mrs. Whitmore is to be removed as beneficiary. The estate reverts to the Edward Whitmore Trust." Murmurs erupted around the table. Cassie's face drained of color. "What clause? What is this?" she stammered, turning to Daniel, her voice rising. Daniel's hand reached into his lap, lifting a small recorder. He pressed play. The room filled with her own voice, dripping with contempt. "I married a cripple, Victor. Do you think I ever loved him? Once he signs tomorrow, the money is ours. Then I'll leave him rotting in that chair while we start a new life." The recording ended. Silence fell heavy as stone. Cassie's lips trembled, her eyes wide with horror. Victor shifted in his seat, his face pale. Daniel's voice broke the silence, steady and cold. "You thought you could play me, Cassie. You thought this chair made me weak. But you forgot, I am my father's son. And you," his eyes hardened, his jaw set, "are nothing but a guest who overstayed her welcome." Cassie lunged forward, grasping at his hands. "Daniel, please, I didn't mean it." "Save it," he cut her off sharply. "The world has heard the truth. You've condemned yourself." Victor stood abruptly, gathering his briefcase, muttering something about misunderstanding, but his steps betrayed his panic. Cassie screamed his name, reaching for him, but he didn't turn back. He left her crumbling in front of everyone. Daniel lifted his father's cane and tapped it once against the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gavel. "This marriage," he declared, "is over." Cassie collapsed to her knees, sobbing, her makeup streaking, her empire of lies crumbling to dust. The lawyer quietly gathered the signed papers, now useless to her. Daniel wheeled himself toward the exit, pausing only once beneath his father's portrait. The old man's stern eyes seemed to burn with approval. "Peace of mind," Daniel whispered, "comes only when betrayal is punished." The camera lingered on Cassie's ruined face as Daniel rolled away, unbroken, untouchable, leaving her with nothing but her own betrayal. The ceremony ended with Cassie on her knees and the empire of lies around her collapsing like ash. The guests murmured, some in shock, some with barely concealed pity. Daniel wheeled himself out of the hall slowly, the sound of his chair against marble echoing like victory drums. His heart was heavy, but there was no regret. Betrayal had burned away the last illusion he had clung to. That evening, as the estate returned to silence, Daniel sat before the fire with his father's portrait above him. He held the inheritance papers, now fully under his name, and stared at the signature he had placed that morning. $500 million. Wealth that could rebuild cities, endow universities, feed generations. For a moment he thought of Cassie's words, a new life, a new start, away from these walls. She had meant it as escape. He chose to make it truth, but not in the way she dreamed. He called for his lawyer and dictated calmly. $100 million to the Edward Whitmore Trust, to provide scholarships for children of workers injured on construction sites. $50 million to fund hospitals in the very towns that bore the Whitmore name. Another portion locked away in a trust for his loyal staff, men and women who had stayed with him even when others whispered he was finished. Every allocation was measured, purposeful, not just to honor his father's legacy but to prove that betrayal would never be his final story. When the lawyer left, Daniel rolled to the window overlooking the gardens. The roses bloomed, red and full, just as they had on his wedding day. He remembered Cassie's laughter then, how she had clung to his arm, whispering that she loved him. The memory no longer cut him, it fueled him. His lips curved into something between sorrow and triumph. "You could have had everything," he murmured to the night. "Instead you chose nothing." The news spread quickly in the days that followed. Society pages reported Cassie's disgrace, the recording that had exposed her, Victor's disappearance from the city. Some whispered Daniel had been ruthless. Others called him brilliant. But the one truth no one could deny was that the crippled heir had turned the ultimate betrayal into the ultimate revenge. In his study, Daniel closed his eyes and let the silence settle. The fire snapped. The estate breathed. For the first time in years, he felt light. He turned, as though addressing every watching soul. His voice was steady, a blade honed sharp. "Loyalty is priceless. Betrayal costs everything. Tell me, viewers, if you were in his place, would you forgive the one who destroyed your trust, or would you do as he did?"